A wealthy CEO fakes unconsciousness to expose a housekeeper child near exposed cash, then witnesses something that shatters every assumption he held about human nature. The vault sat unguarded, displaying stacks of currency representing decades of earnings. Thomas Mitchell stayed completely still in his executive chair, controlling his breathing, eyes barely open, monitoring her every action. Young Jasmine, merely 6 years old, walked into the study, clutching her mother, Diana's fingers. They'd come for the overnight cleaning rotation, their routine for 24 months at Thomas's corporation. The child wore tiny rose-colored work gloves, something Diana purchased so her daughter would feel purposeful while joining her during summer break. Thomas had orchestrated this scenario with precision. After learning his business associate had stolen $3 million, his faith in people crumbled. At 45, he constructed a financial dynasty. Yet now he questioned whether a single truthful soul existed anywhere. The experiment was straightforward. Position the vault open with visible wealth and observe whether anyone could withstand desire. Diana started wiping down the library shelves, absorbed in her duties. Jasmine, inquisitive like every youngster, wandered toward the desk where Thomas appeared unconscious. Her small eyes widened seeing such abundance, exceeding anything she'd witnessed before. Thomas stopped breathing for a moment, bracing himself for another letdown. What transpired next left him utterly frozen. Jasmine ignored the currency. Instead, she observed the bills were scattered and started organizing them methodically, grouping them by value and arranging them with the care of a miniature accountant. Her tiny fingers worked with remarkable gentleness, treating each note like something precious. "Mother," she murmured, "Mr. Thomas's bills were all scattered. I organized them exactly how you showed me with our change back home." Diana spun around quickly, alarmed. "Jasmine, you mustn't handle the employer's belongings." "But everything was messy, Mom. He'll appreciate it when he awakens and discovers everything orderly." Thomas experienced something dormant for years, his chest constricted with feeling. This youngster, who'd likely never held more than $20, had arranged a fortune rather than pocketing a single bill. Beyond that, she insisted on informing her mother what she'd accomplished with the pure transparency of someone concealing nothing. What Thomas couldn't foresee was that this basic act of integrity from a 6-year-old would trigger cascading consequences that would transform, not just his existence, but also expose realities about bias, compassion, and genuine human worth he never imagined possible. If you're curious about how one child can deliver profound wisdom to a corporate titan, definitely subscribe because this transformation narrative is just getting started. And what unfolds demonstrates that, occasionally, the most profound teachings emerge from completely unexpected sources. During subsequent weeks, Thomas kept monitoring Diana and Jasmine quietly. He learned Diana managed dual employment, sanitizing his corporation overnight and a medical practice each morning. Jasmine constantly accompanied her, completing schoolwork in lobbies or entertaining herself silently while her mother labored. What struck Thomas hardest was the values Diana instilled in her daughter. "We invariably return belongings that aren't ours, regardless of who's watching," he overheard her instructing the youngster. "Our integrity surpasses any wealth imaginable." Diana had matured in a foster placement after her parents died when she turned 9. She fought to complete secondary education while employed, but was never afforded a university. At 22, she conceived Jasmine, and the biological father vanished upon learning the news. Subsequently, she'd been providing for her daughter independently, declining any assistance she viewed as handouts. Thomas began quietly boosting Diana's compensation, directing the Human Resources Division to classify it as a position reclassification. However, his charitable gesture caught the attention of problematic observers. Richard Blackwood, operations vice president and a 50-year-old executive comfortable with inherited advantages, spotted the financial adjustment during a session. "Thomas, why are we allocating additional funds on janitorial personnel, particularly that specific worker?" "Diana performs exceptionally," Thomas responded coolly. "Exceptionally?" Richard scoffed dismissively. "Thomas, you must comprehend where such individuals belong. Provide them extra compensation, and they'll immediately demand the entire treasury. It's their fundamental nature." Thomas felt fury building, yet maintained composure. Richard descended from a founding partner and controlled substantial equity. His discriminatory perspectives had always been overlooked by leadership because of his financial leverage. "Furthermore," Richard proceeded, "she transports that youngster here. That's unprofessional." What kind of parent subjects a child to a business setting? Obviously, she lacks appropriate family infrastructure. That evening, Thomas observed something that enraged him. Richard had remained late at the facility and encountered Diana in the corridor. "Understand this carefully," he declared threateningly. "I recognize you're receiving more compensation than justified. I'm uncertain what kind of arrangements you're making, but it's ending." Diana grew pale. "Sir, I'm confused. Naturally, you're confused. Individuals like you never comprehend. You simply accept what's provided and stay silent and remove that child from here. This isn't childcare." Jasmine concealed herself behind her mother, frightened by the hostile tone. Diana embraced her daughter protectively. "Sir, I'm merely performing my responsibilities. Your responsibility is sanitation and invisibility. Nothing beyond that." Thomas watched everything from his workspace, experiencing something absent for years, a cleansing rage. Richard had violated a boundary that couldn't be reversed. Not only had he degraded Diana, but he'd terrorized an innocent child whose sole transgression was accompanying her mother to employment. That night, Thomas concluded, remaining passive was insufficient. Richard Blackwood had revealed his authentic character, and Thomas possessed resources to address it. What Richard didn't realize was that Thomas had captured the entire exchange. The surveillance infrastructure that Richard personally authorized to monitor workers now documented his own toxic language, but Thomas desired more than recordings. He wanted Richard to incriminate himself publicly in such a mortifying manner that he'd never resurface in professional circles again. The strategy forming in his consciousness was extensive, not merely protecting Diana and Jasmine, but exploiting Richard's arrogance against him. Every additional humiliation the executive inflicted only reinforced something within Thomas that had remained inactive for years, a hunger for accountability that intensified, powered by the very injustice he witnessed. What that privileged administrator didn't comprehend was that every contemptuous action was inscribing his own verdict of downfall, and that a billionaire committed to defending an innocent household could become the most formidable opponent someone like him would ever encounter. The following morning, Thomas initiated a call Richard could never anticipate. "Marcus, I require your expertise again." He communicated by telephone with Marcus Chun, a former federal investigator and authority in corporate investigations. The pair had collaborated during the embezzlement situation, and Marcus understood every shadowy aspect of the business realm. "What category of trouble presently, Thomas?" "The variety involving systemic racism and authority abuse." "I need concrete proof against Richard Blackwood." Marcus laughed on the connection. "That privileged heir? That'll be simpler than confiscating sweets from an infant. Individuals like him invariably leave traces." Meanwhile, Richard escalated his psychological warfare operation against Diana. On Monday, he appeared at the personnel division with a catalog of manufactured infractions. "This worker has been arriving tardy consistently," he deceived Sandra Miller, the HR administrator. "And that youngster she transports with her is generating disruptions." Sandra, a capable professional in her 40s, sensed something was incorrect. Diana had never been tardy in her 24 months of employment. "Mr. Blackwood, I must verify the documentation." "Documentation can be modified," Richard interrupted arrogantly. "I'm the operations vice president. My statement should suffice." Thomas monitored everything through surveillance equipment, documenting every utterance. The infrastructure Richard installed to track productivity now captures his own fabrications and authority misuse. On Wednesday, Richard crossed an even more hazardous boundary. He intercepted Diana in the vehicle area when she arrived with Jasmine for the overnight rotation. "Understand this carefully," he stated, obstructing her entrance path. "I recognize you're performing more than sanitation to earn that additional compensation. What category of specialized arrangements are you providing?" Diana trembled with anger and fear. "Sir, what you're suggesting is, I'm suggesting that individuals like you invariably have a cost, and I'm interested to discover what yours is." Jasmine hid behind her mother, whispering, "Mother, why is that gentleman being cruel?" "Don't concern yourself, my daughter," Diana replied with a dignity contrasting with Richard's poison. "Some grown-ups are miserable and attempt to make others miserable too." Richard laughed cruelly. "Miserable? I possess more wealth in this billfold than you both will ever witness in your complete existences. I should concern myself with what individuals like you might attempt when you become too comfortable." Thomas reviewed the footage that night with a controlled anger that intensified with each viewing. Marcus had arrived with a preliminary file on Richard that validated his suspicions. The executive had a background of tormenting Black and Hispanic workers at former positions. Examine this, Marcus stated, indicating documents. 3 employment lawsuits resolved without trials. Always identical patterns. Systematic degradation until the individual resigns. And why was he never punished? Father purchased the silence and relocated his offspring to alternate corporations when situations intensified. Richard Blackwood is a professional parasite. Thomas examined every document page. Richard wasn't merely prejudiced. He was a serial aggressor who exploited his status and wealth to torture defenseless individuals. Marcus, I want everything on him. Communications, electronic messages, social platforms, behavioral patterns, everything. Thomas, are you orchestrating something substantial? I'm orchestrating accountability. On Thursday, Sandra Miller approached Thomas quietly. Mr. Mitchell, I must discuss Richard Blackwood with you. He's pressuring to terminate Diana, but I lack any lawful grounds. I suspect there's something individual occurring. Thomas feigned astonishment. What category of pressure? He claims she's breaching protocols, but when I investigate, I can't locate any proof. Yesterday, he proposed that individuals like her shouldn't access administrative zones after operating hours. Individuals like her? Sandra paused. Sir, I suspect there are discriminatory implications in his behavior. It was the opportunity Thomas required. Sandra, if you suspect discrimination, you must record everything formally. Initiate an internal inquiry. But he's the vice president, and I'm the president. Record everything. That night, Thomas implemented phase 2 of his strategy. He instructed the technology division to position additional recording devices in zones where Richard had been recognized to intimidate workers. Officially, it was an enhancement to the surveillance infrastructure. In reality, it was a digital snare. Friday night, when Richard assumed he was isolated in the facility, he initiated a telephone call. Thomas heard everything through the audio infrastructure. Father, that situation we discussed. Yes, the Black housekeeper. She's having difficulty. I need you to utilize your connections to generate some legal complications for her. Suspicion of larceny, documentation problems, anything that will compel her to resign. His father's voice resonated through the speaker. Richard, are you certain you're not overreacting? A mere housekeeper. Father, it's a principal matter. If we permit these individuals to feel too comfortable, soon they'll be requesting rights they don't deserve. It's preferable to address this before other workers, similar ones, start getting concepts. Thomas captured every word, experiencing a cold satisfaction. Richard had just confessed to conspiracy, fabricating proof, and explicit racial discrimination. Marcus appeared at Thomas's workspace on Monday morning with a briefcase containing proof. Thomas, you won't believe what I discovered. Richard has publications on private platforms that are authentic supremacist declarations. Dialogues in restricted groups where he and other administrators make mockeries about Black workers. There's additional. I discovered that he utilized his father's leverage to undermine Black applicants in other corporations' selection procedures. There's a 15-year pattern of systematic discriminatory conduct. Thomas examined screenshots of dialogues where Richard wrote statements like, necessary to maintain those primates in their position, and the sole method to address these individuals is demonstrating to them who is superior from the beginning. Marcus, this is invaluable. Wait, there's additional. He's orchestrating something against Diana for this week. I intercepted communications from him organizing a staged larceny. Thomas felt the circulation drain from his face. What do you mean? He's going to position something expensive in her sanitation supplies, then discover it publicly. He'll contact law enforcement, create a spectacle, humiliate her before everyone. At that moment, Thomas realized that Richard had completely miscalculated who he was confronting. The executive assumed he was addressing a distracted employer and a defenseless worker. He had no comprehension that he was walking directly into a snare that had been 15 years in construction. Thomas looked at Marcus with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Perfect, let him attempt. The further he proceeds, the harder he'll collapse. What Richard Blackwood didn't comprehend was that every cruel maneuver he executed was being meticulously recorded by someone who had transformed protecting the innocent into an exact discipline and who possessed unlimited resources to guarantee that accountability was delivered, in such a devastating manner that it would become legendary in professional circles. The following Tuesday, Richard executed his planned scheme with the arrogant confidence of someone who had never confronted genuine consequences. At 8 that evening, when Diana and Jasmine arrived for their sanitation rotation, he had already positioned a $15,000 timepiece in the cleaning equipment. Perfect, Richard muttered to himself, observing from the surveillance equipment. I'll provide her 15 minutes to commence work. Then I'll capture her in the act. What Richard didn't realize was that Thomas was upstairs monitoring his every movement on high-resolution displays. Marcus Chun was strategically stationed in the vehicle area with a van containing a recording apparatus. 3 investigative journalists, quietly contacted by Thomas, waited outside the structure. Marcus, he just positioned the timepiece, Thomas reported via radio. Activate the additional recordings. Confirmed. All the extra equipment is functioning. We have angles he doesn't even realize exist. At 8:20, Richard descended to the workspace where Diana was quietly sanitizing while Jasmine completed her schoolwork at a nearby surface. He brought 2 security personnel with him and pretended to be performing a routine inspection. Mrs. Diana, Richard stated with false courtesy, I must inspect your sanitation supplies. We've had reports of absent items. Diana stopped sanitizing, confused. Mr. Blackwood, I'm puzzled. It's standard procedure, Richard lied, walking directly to the equipment where he had positioned the timepiece. Ah, how fascinating. What's this? He removed the timepiece with exaggerated theatricality as if he had just discovered the ultimate treasure. Diana Jefferson, this is a $15,000 timepiece that went absent from Mr. Mitchell's workspace yesterday. Diana turned completely pale. I've never witnessed this timepiece in my existence. Naturally not, Richard stated with poisonous sarcasm. It just materialized on your equipment, didn't it? Jasmine stood up from her chair, frightened. Mother, what's occurring? Be silent, child, Richard ordered brutally. Your mother will have to accompany us to explain how expensive items magically materialize in her materials. One of the security personnel had already picked up the telephone to contact law enforcement, exactly as Richard had instructed. Police, we must report a larceny in progress. It was at that moment that Thomas appeared at the workspace door with Marcus and 3 individuals Richard didn't immediately recognize. Richard, Thomas stated with a calmness that made Richard's circulation run cold. I think you should terminate that telephone. Thomas, I'm glad you're here. We captured your worker stealing your timepiece. Thomas laughed, a cold sound that resonated through the silent workspace. My timepiece, Richard? I've been wearing a smartwatch for 5 years. I've never possessed a luxury timepiece. The confidence on Richard's face began to falter. What? What are you stating? I'm stating we just captured you positioning a timepiece you purchased this morning in Diana's shopping equipment to incriminate her. Marcus approached with a tablet displaying high-definition footage of Richard placing the timepiece in the equipment 40 minutes earlier. Angle 1, he stated, swiping to the next video. Angle 2, Angle 3. We even have your face clearly visible when you verify to ensure nobody is observing. Richard attempted to speak, but Thomas interrupted him. Oh, but there's significantly more. Richard, Marcus, display the compilation we assembled. Marcus opened a digital file and began projecting its contents onto a portable screen. First came screenshots of Richard's racist publications in private groups. Necessary to maintain these primates in their position, Marcus read aloud. That's yours, isn't it, Richard? Diana gasped, covering her mouth with her hands. Richard attempted to get closer to the screen, but Thomas blocked him. Here's your dialogue planning to generate legal complications for Diana. Marcus continued. And here's your confession that it's a principal matter to prevent these individuals from feeling comfortable. Where did you acquire this? Richard stammered, perspiration beginning to form on his forehead. Security infrastructure, you authorized personally, remember? Including that call to your conspiracy fabricating father to manufacture proof against an innocent worker. One of the journalists identified herself. Jennifer Walsh, Channel 7 News. Mr. Blackwood, would you like to comment on this proof of systematic racial discrimination and conspiracy to manufacture criminal proof? Richard finally comprehended the magnitude of what was occurring. You can't utilize that. I have rights. Naturally you do, Thomas stated calmly. You have the right to remain silent because anything you state will be utilized against you. Not just by law enforcement who are already en route to arrest you for conspiracy and attempted defamation, but also by the media, the corporation board, and Diana's attorneys. Marcus continued the presentation. We also have documentation of your 15 years of systematic discrimination in former positions. 3 lawsuits hushed up by father, 8 black and Hispanic workers you harassed until they resigned. And best of all, Thomas interrupted, we have recordings of you on equipment you didn't even realize existed, including your threats to Diana in the vehicle area and your disgusting advances. The second reporter stepped forward with equipment. Mr. Blackwood, how do you respond to the accusations that you utilized your status to systematically persecute minority workers? Richard attempted to run, but Marcus blocked the exit. Oh, I almost forgot, Marcus stated with a smile. Your bank account was frozen an hour ago. Your household has already been notified of the contents of the proof, and the corporation board has called an emergency session for tomorrow morning to discuss your termination for cause and possible legal action. Diana, who had remained in shock throughout the revelation, finally found her voice. Mr. Mitchell, did you realize this was going to occur? Diana, I realized Richard was prejudiced, but I didn't imagine he would proceed so far as attempting to destroy you with false proof. When I discovered his scheme, I decided it was time to stop observing passively. Jasmine approached Thomas timidly. Mr. Thomas, will the cruel gentleman stop frightening Mother now? Thomas knelt to the youngster's height. No, sweetheart. He'll never bother you again. Richard, desperate, made one last pathetic attempt. Thomas, we can settle this between gentlemen. My household has significant investments in the corporation. Had, Thomas corrected him, until 20 minutes ago, when the board voted unanimously to force the purchase of all Blackwood household shares. Congratulations, you've managed to ruin not only your own career, but also your household's fortune. The police arrived at that moment, but it wasn't Diana who was arrested. Richard Blackwood, Detective Harris stated, you're under arrest for conspiracy to manufacture proof, harassment, racial discrimination, and attempted defamation. As they handcuffed Richard, he looked at Diana with a hatred that finally revealed his authentic nature. This won't stand. My household has leverage. Had, Marcus corrected again, until this morning when the proof was leaked to all major media outlets. Your father called 2 hours ago requesting to be removed from the corporation's contact list. The third reporter approached Diana. Miss Jefferson, how does it feel to realize that you have been completely vindicated and that your persecutor will face the full consequences? Diana looked at Jasmine, then at Thomas. I feel gratitude. Gratitude that individuals are willing to fight for accountability, even when it would be easier to ignore it. Thomas watched Richard being led away in handcuffs, knowing that the executive faced not only prison but complete social and financial ruin. His reputation was ruined forever. His household had disowned him, and his career had ended so humiliatingly that it would become legendary in professional circles. Diana, Thomas stated, would you like to discuss a promotion? As Diana smiled through her tears and Jasmine applauded without fully comprehending what had occurred, it was clear that accountability had been delivered in such a devastating manner that it would be remembered for generations, proving that miscalculating human decency can be the most expensive mistake anyone can make. 6 months later, Diana Jefferson walked through the corridors of Mitchell Enterprises no longer as a housekeeper, but as Director of Human Resources, a status Thomas had established especially for her after discovering her business degree that she had never been able to complete. Her first decision was to implement a scholarship initiative for workers' children, an initiative of which Jasmine would be the first beneficiary. Mother, can I show Mr. Thomas my new illustration? Asked Jasmine, now 7, running through the workspace that had become her second home. She attended the finest private academy in town and already spoke fluently about wanting to be an attorney to help individuals like Mr. Thomas helped us. Thomas smiled, observing the complete transformation of their existences. His corporation had won awards for inclusion and diversity, becoming a national benchmark for hiring Black individuals in executive positions. The Fair Chance Initiative, established in honor of Diana's case, had already benefited more than 200 households. Meanwhile, Richard Blackwood was living a completely different reality. After serving 18 months in prison for racial discrimination and conspiracy, he was released to find that his reputation was destroyed. No reputable corporation would hire him. His wife had filed for divorce, taking half of their remaining assets. His children had changed their last name and refused to speak to him. The executive who was once vice president of a large corporation now worked as a used vehicle salesman, earning less in a year than Diana did in 3 months. His racist publications continued to circulate on the internet, preventing any attempt to rebuild his image. Father Thomas, Jasmine stated during dinner at the new house Thomas had purchased for them. The teacher asked us to write about our heroes. Can I write about you? Thomas felt tears well up in his eyes. Jasmine, the authentic hero of this story is your mother, who taught you that integrity is worth more than any amount of wealth. Diana took Thomas's hand. No, the hero is the one who dared to fight when it would have been easier to ignore it. The following week, Thomas received an unexpected call. Mr. Mitchell, this is national news reporter Michael Torres. I'd like to do a story on how your corporation became a model of inclusion after the Blackwood case. The story aired during prime time, displaying Jasmine playing in the workspace where it all began, Diana working in her new role, and Thomas explaining how a 6-year-old had changed his view of accountability and humanity. Richard watched the report from his one-bedroom apartment, drinking alone as he saw his old existence thriving without him. He attempted to call former colleagues, but they had all blocked his number. He attempted to establish new social media profiles, but his racist publications kept resurfacing, haunting him like digital ghosts from his past. 3 years later, on Jasmine's 10th birthday, Thomas made a special announcement during the birthday party. Jasmine Diana, you have changed my existence in ways I can never fully repay. That is why I have established the Jasmine Jefferson Educational Fund, which will provide university scholarships to talented young black individuals for the next 50 years. Jasmine ran to embrace him. Thank you for believing in us when nobody else did. That same day, Richard was attempting to get employment at a fuel station, but was rejected after the manager searched his name online and found the famous article about racial discrimination. His fall had been so complete and public that it became a case study in business schools about how prejudice and arrogance can destroy entire careers. Thomas realized that authentic revenge was never about destroying Richard. It was about building something bigger than he could ever imagine. He transformed an ordinary corporation into a symbol of social accountability, established opportunities for hundreds of individuals, and proved that integrity leads to genuine prosperity. The integrity of a 6-year-old taught me that the best response to hatred is love and action, Thomas stated during a speech at Harvard University. Richard attempted to bring us down, but he ended up lifting us to heights we never dreamed we could reach. Today, Jasmine is attending a prep academy bound for Harvard. Diana has an advanced business degree and is nationally recognized for her innovations in human resources. And Thomas has been honored by the government for his contributions to racial equality in the corporate environment. Richard, who still lives alone, working odd jobs, is remembered only as an example of what occurs when someone miscalculates the power of human decency, combined with the determination to do what is right. Authentic accountability was not Richard's imprisonment or his financial ruin. It was proving that compassion, when protected by strength, builds legacies that inspire generations. If this story of transformation touched your heart, subscribe to discover more stories that prove that doing good is always worth it, even when it seems impossible.